company boards and leaders should prepare for a possible recession? Stephanie Resnick is partner and co-chair of the Director and Officers Liability and Corporate Governance Practice Group at Fox Rothschild. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
Good, and thank you for being with me today. Do you think that company leaders and decision makers, do you think they're being faulted for failing to prepare for a recession in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think that's a real possibility. If anything, we've learned from the pandemic that you do have to prepare.
Mhm.
And so I'm hopeful that boards and company leadership would be preparing for a, um, a recession.
I wonder if sometimes they feel there's a possibility of a self-fulfilling prophecy that if they say negative things, then their stock will go down automatically, whether or not there's a recession. Is there some fear about doing that, that they just don't want to be forthright?
I just think that there should be proper planning. I mean, if it's
Mhm.
a smaller company, it should be discussed and there should be transparency around the issue because depending upon what the company does, there could be further supply chain issues. There could be issues regarding potential layoffs. There could be issues regarding economic drops in either the stock price or just if it's a smaller company in the value of the company. So um, I think that all of these things have to be addressed. The worst possible thing that could happen is if a company just stands idly by and doesn't address it. So it's incumbent on the board
Mhm.
to address these issues.
Yeah, if we don't say anything, maybe it'll go away. Doesn't seem to work that way, does it?
No, that
Um,
that 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 will set you up for a lawsuit.
yeah, especially in the age of social media. But how
Exactly.
should they more specifically respond to like negative financial news, especially with regard to the prospects of recession? What actions should they take?
Well, I think that there are many actions. I think that the board and leadership should discuss what action should we take. First of all, there should be that first level discussion of um, what they should do, whether it's making a separate committee, whether it's having a full on board discussion about where the company is from a financial standpoint and where that company might be in the event of a recession, whether it's consumer driven product, whether it's a larger company, a smaller company. It really depends based upon the company and what it is that the company is doing. But
Mhm.
if you would take, for instance, a manufacturing company, you would want to be aware of what that recession is going to look like and start preparing because what a recession does is it exposes weakness and what you as a company have to do is show that you're going to be able to withstand the storm, whether that means tightening up the belt, looking at your staff models, your real estate, you could go on and on as to what a company can do just to make sure that it is moving forward in a very efficient way.
But the problem is nobody can predict exactly, number one, if a recession is going to happen, and number two, if it does happen, just how deep it's going to be. And the depth of the recession is going to determine just how drastic your reactions are. I mean, if you go all out and lay off a whole bunch of people and close a few factories, and it turns out the recession's not that bad, you're in trouble. So, I mean, how do you weigh that as to the severity of your reaction when nobody knows just exactly what's going to happen?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. And clearly, you can't go full bore. You
Mhm.
need to really take it one step at a time, have a discussion as a company about it, and then make plans of, not a radical change, but if and when there are certain downturns, then you have to take certain actions, whether it be just an intense review of some of the things in terms of costs, cutting back costs, in terms of staff, in terms of modeling, in terms of those sorts of things. Um, it's just planning for the future, and it's not a drastic plan. Certainly,
Yeah.
if you're in a recession, and it ultimately turns out that there needs to be drastic measures, then the company will take those drastic measures. But I would certainly caution against that.
Employees can be very sensitive to this type of news. And in fact, they could be freaking out, wondering whether their own jobs are at stake or not. How can company leaders make their employees feel safe and secure in their roles, regardless of what the outcome might be?
I think that's all leadership and how this is all presented. I don't think any employee would be offended by the truth. And if the company's leadership lays it out in a manner that says that, we're looking at a recession that has nothing to do with us, and there may be measures that we're going to need to take, but our talent are first and foremost in our minds, and we're going to, get through this together. I think that's the approach. The approach is a collaborative, transparent approach.
Mm-hmm. The scariest thing is when the employees get no word from their bosses or their boards or their leaders at all. It just,
Exactly, because
everybody just shuts up and there's a
that's
silence and paranoia going on. So you can't
then
have that.
that's the first thing that happens, that starts kind of a flow of employee discontent, employee departures, which could really have an adverse effect on a company, and unnecessarily so.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned earlier perhaps the concern that company leaders might have about the impact on their stock price if they get too drastic in their negativity or their feeling about a recession. But how then should boards communicate with shareholders about their concerns over a potential recession?
Well, I think that, again, reasonably and transparently, and I use that word over and over and over again, because when there is transparency from the board, um, we're usually able to maneuver around any potential shareholder issues. When there's not transparency from the board, that's when there's a problem. And to my mind, there should not be an over exaggeration. It should just be very factual. The recession isn't caused by the company, the recession is caused by the government and all of the things around us, the world that contributes to this.
Yeah.
So we just take reasonable steps as a company. We are going to be able to, in my mind, show the public and the shareholders that we're acting responsibly. It's when there's no discussion, when there is no action, even a conversation among the board that says, how do we handle this if there's a severe economic drop or there's a further supply chain issue? I mean, that's what caught everyone by surprise in the pandemic, was that there was very little preparedness, because we didn't know whether it was going to be 2 weeks, and in fact it wasn't 2 weeks, it was like
Yeah.
2 years. So,
Hmm.
and I guess some would say we're still in the pandemic. So the most significant thing is really a dialogue with the board, I guess the standard would be a reasonableness of how do we address this. We know it's being forecasted, and what do we do in the event of this recession? One of the things that's very easy to do is just take a deeper dive into your financials, your cost proposals, your structures. If you're about to embark on a major project, maybe you halt that just until you get a better sense of where the economic forecast is going to be.
Yeah. Of course, these days it's so complex, it's not just about cost and profitability. It's also about issues of ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Those have to be in the mix too, as you're looking for facing a potential crisis. How can boards and company leaders work that into their communication, and what should be their concerns there on that side? Corporate social responsibility.
Rob, I think that if a company has committed to it, it must continue to commit to that.
Mhm.
And that in and of itself is sending a message to its employees, its staff, the public, its shareholders. That is going to really in my view, really indicate whether a company truly is engaged in diversity efforts and social progress or not.
Yeah.
And from my mind, it's not hard to um, completely engage DEI efforts and all of that, even though there may be a potential recession. Those must stand, especially if promises have been made,
Yeah.
because
So
that's where, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
interrupt.
that's all right. It's a good point. So no cutting corners out of panic over what might happen in recession, because your brand is not only are your employees at risk, your brand is at risk if you don't keep up the pressure on that side. Stephanie Resnick of Fox Rothschild, I want to thank you so much for helping us to understand just what boards and company leaders can do. Very timely discussion as we look at the possibility of recession coming up, what they can do in such an economic crisis. Thank you very much for being with me today.
Thank you, Rob.